Hello, I'm your news anchor, Zariana Exu, reporting for Simply Raw News in studio, downtown Dream City Park, California. Trio Delvin Ketchup, 26, Richard Mayo, 28, and Samuel Mustard, 29, all of the condiment sim are wanted for questioning in connection with the drive-by shooting. Ketchup was identified by witnesses as the driver, Mayo identified as the alleged shooter, and Mustard was seen pushing Ketchup's 1962 model Chevy Impala uphill toward the target home, with Mayo allegedly hanging out of the back passenger window when the vehicle ran out of gas 2 houses before. Ranchero Dressing, the alleged target, was alerted to the trio's presence by neighbor Basil Seasoning. Dressing emerged from his home and began firing his .22 automatic in the trio's direction. Seasoning appeared from his home across the street and threw a softball, striking Mustard in the head and knocking him into the front yard of Dressing. Mustard was then allegedly kicked and punched repeatedly by Dressing, while Ketchup and Mayo rolled backward downhill in Ketchup's car. When the car struck a fire hydrant, Ketchup and Mayo fled the scene. As of now, there are no reports of gunshot wounds. More details as this story develops. In other news, an argument quickly escalated into a violent altercation between roommates Kashmir Rushing, 21, and Shanika Moderate, 23, on the Regal Sim. The two were arguing over money for rent and utilities when Moderate struck Rushing in the face. The authorities were called by a neighbor who witnessed the altercation. Both Rushing and Moderate were arrested and taken into custody on charges of assault and disturbing the peace. A third party, a neighbor who attempted to de-escalate the situation between Rushing and Moderate, was also taken into custody and later released with no charges filed. A special thanks to the 582nd District Court for the neighbor's release. Now, what have we learned from this all, Simply Raw fam? Stop using hood movies as a blueprint to real life. The only time the perfect crime occurs is when it's in the script. And minding your business is not only free, but may guarantee that you stay free. This has been Zariana Exu reporting.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for tuning in to Simply Raw News. I'm Starchild Sinclair, and tonight's story involves a collision and a near-fatal confrontation. In a rather startling twist of events, Harold McKenzie, an 82-year-old gentleman out on a routine drive to get some beer, crossed paths with Jason Pottsmith, a 35-year-old gentleman out on his daily bike ride. At approximately 11:30 a.m., Harold, traveling on Juju Wood Avenue, was approaching an intersection. Instead of paying attention to traffic, he was looking at his phone and failed to stop at the stop sign. Jason, expecting the car to stop, continued forward, was struck by Harold's car, and landed 30 feet away, sustaining multiple injuries. Harold heard the thud of his car striking the cyclist, panicked, and fled the scene, perhaps thinking nobody saw a thing. He probably figured he could just drive right along, get his car fixed up, polished, and looking as if nothing ever happened. Little did he know, there was a pedestrian who witnessed the incident and reported it to the authorities. Jason was taken to the hospital, where police took his statement. When they showed up at Harold's house, he immediately knew he was caught. But the story doesn't end here. Fast forward to a few months later. Jason, still in the hospital in traction, but healing nicely, is streaming a live feed from the courtroom so he can provide his testimony and witness the proceedings. There are two other guests in attendance. Jason's parents, a couple who most people, including Jason, would describe as odd, Bosco and Stella Pottsmith. They drove up from Picklesville, Mississippi a couple months earlier to care for their son while he was in the hospital. Stella, a tough, crabby old woman who is always ready to box someone's ears when they piss her off, sat next to her husband Bosco, who has an annoying habit of whining in an oddly high-pitched voice whenever he loses at poker. They sat in the gallery awaiting the arrival of the judge. The judge arrived, called the court to order, and listened to the testimony of the eyewitness and Jason. Harold's lawyer entered a plea deal, which resulted in Harold having to pay the cost of Jason's hospital bills, including rehab, lost wages, and buying him a new bike. Expecting a different kind of justice, Bosco stormed out of the courtroom with Stella in tow. He was angry and wanted payback, so he jumped in the car and waited for Harold to emerge from the courthouse. As Harold approached the curb, Bosco threw the car in reverse and accelerated toward Harold. Harold stepped off the curb, looked to his right, and froze like a deer in headlights as he saw the car racing toward him. Stella, always calm under pressure, demanded that Bosco stop the car immediately or else. He complied and brought the car to a stop less than a foot from Harold, who immediately fainted. With a devilish grin of satisfaction, Bosco drove off and headed to the hospital. Fortunately, cooler heads prevailed, or he would have been locked up for murder. Jason is back riding his bike, paid for by Harold, and Harold only spent a couple months in jail. So folks, here's a nice ending to an almost tragic story, one that will be remembered by Jason, his parents, and most of all, Harold. For Simply Raw News, I'm Star Child Sinclair. And remember, stay tuned, stay sharp, and keep your eyes on the road, not your phone.